I am so happy to welcome you back to Rooted in the Caribbean, our Women in Leadership series. Today, my guest is Michelle Clarke. Michelle and I have known each other since 2009, and I am honored to have her as part of this series. Michelle is currently Director of Human Resources, Communications, and Corporate Secretarial Services at NH International Caribbean Limited. Michelle has over 20 years HR experience and she's passionate about developing people, building strong organizational cultures, driving succession planning, and advancing women in leadership. Throughout her career, Michelle has championed initiatives that support growth at all levels, from introducing NH's first internship program um, just before the start of the 2019, I believe, to leading the reintroduction of the graduate trainee program and a middle management development initiative at the Massey Group, where she worked for several years. Her work reflects a deep commitment to creating inclusive, future-ready workplaces. A proud mother of 20-year-old triplets. I can't believe they're that old, but they're now adults. Michelle holds a BSc in Applied Statistics from the University of Toronto, and she is a member of the Parish Pastoral Council of St. Finbarr's RC Church in Trinidad. Please welcome Michelle. Welcome to Rooted in the Caribbean, our Women in Leadership series. And today my guest is a really great friend of mine, Michelle Clarke. Michelle and I have known each other since 2009. When she interviewed me for a role in the Massey Group. And we've had a firm friendship ever since. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Dominique. And as you were just saying, I wouldn't do this for anybody but you because I don't like being in the limelight. I definitely don't like talking about myself. But you're such a great friend that I couldn't resist.
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, the reason I'm doing this is myself coming out of my own comfort zone, just wanting to capture uh, just the real essence of what it means to be a woman in leadership and how we get through the pitfalls and the challenges that we face to be successful and remain successful in leadership. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So my first question, Michelle, tell us about your roots.
So, Dominique, since you've asked me that, and a Caribbean woman and their roots in leadership, I mean, I've been thinking of this for weeks. And I
Wow.
was like, where do I begin? But you know what? I really want to thank you for asking me that question because I think leadership is about reflection.
Hmm.
And this has allowed me to reflect on that. And it's allowed me to see how that has impacted me as a woman and as a leader.
Right.
So, basically, when I think about my roots, I'll start off by saying, as somebody growing up in the Caribbean, you're raised by, I say take a village to raise a child.
Hmm.
So you're raised by not only your mother and your father, but you're raised by your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncles, your aunts, your great aunts, your great
Yeah.
uncles. And for me, um, my parents separated when I was very young, maybe like 3 years old.
Right.
And so for me, all of them played a really instrumental role in my life
Hmm.
and in raising me and in who I am today. You
Mm.
know, um, and it's very interesting because my grandmother's maiden name was Rowbottom, right? So that's a
Okay.
very English name.
Yeah.
And she was a really strong woman. She actually ran away, much to the distaste of her family, to marry my grandfather,
Right.
right? Whose last name was Ramji Singh. Back in the day,
That was
that was
unheard
not
of.
that was unheard of, right? So that whole family dynamic in terms of my mother and her siblings couldn't even go to their grandparents' house because, that racial issue was
Mm.
there, you know. So it was really interesting for me because even on my father's side, even though were separated young, I still knew my grandparents and my grandfather's. His last name was Martinez, right?
Ah,
So I have Spanish roots, I have English roots,
English
I have
roots.
Indian roots, I have and a lot of Carib also. So
Right.
on both sides of the family, very strong Carib influence. And then of course I'm married and my husband is of African descent. I'm mixed, yes, but still I'm not my children are very, very mixed. They don't know what they are, right?
Real
But
pillow.
real pillow. And I never thought about it in this way, but
Mhm.
a lot of people I've worked with say that I'm colorblind, I'm like
Right.
colorblind, and only when you asked me the question and I started to think, I was like, oh my God, that is why I'm how I am, because
Right.
I experienced that from a baby. I mean,
Yeah.
I have all kind of different races in my family. I don't see color. It's all over. We're kind of all one. And
Yeah.
sometimes I get disheartened because I think like we've moved to a level that's not that. I think over
Hmm.
the years the race has become a real issue and divide. And growing up, I didn't have that. I mean, my mother subsequently remarried, and I had a wonderful stepfather who he helped raise me, and he was Trini White. So
Mm.
I mean, and I have a stepsister who married an Asian guy. So really, I really never thought about it. But you
Yeah.
asking me that question really solidified that. Oh, that's where I got it from.
Yeah.
That's why
And
when I see people.
yes.
You know, I
Yeah.
don't see a color, I don't see a race, I don't see a class.
Yeah.
And that has been important to me. So I never really thought about it honestly, Dom, until you really asked me about my Caribbean roots. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's
Wow.
what my Caribbean roots. I'm really a Caribbean person.
And I can attest to what you described in terms of how you show up in that. I remember when I interviewed for that role, um, I'd interviewed at another organization in Trinidad, and one of the things that they queried was my age, because I was pretty young and I had a fair amount of experience from the UK, and I moved back to Trinidad, and my experience of you was one where I felt like what I was bringing to the table was all that you were concerned about. It didn't matter what I looked like, it didn't matter my age, and so I can definitely attest to that's how you show up for others.
Well, I'm so happy because I don't know that I show up that way to others, but just on reflection, that I hope I do. But Dom,
Yeah.
the interesting thing about that story when I interviewed you, you remember you had, was it orange or green hair?
It was probably orange, closer to orange.
How many other people on the panel, like, and I'm like, what does that matter? That doesn't matter. What the hell does that matter? At the end of the day, can she do the job or not do the job? Doesn't matter the color of her hair. I've been talking about it now, Dom. I
Yeah, you
remember that
remember that.
specifically. Yeah, and I'm like, no, let's it was you and another candidate, and I was like, let's put this on the chart. Let's see what we want. Does she have this? Does she have this? Does she have this? Yes? Doesn't matter the color of her hair.
That's so funny. But yes, that is how you show up. My experience of you showing up.
Mm.
So that is really interesting. How do you think, now that you've reflected on it, how do you think you have carried that with you in terms of your leadership journey? How has that
Mhm.
influenced how you are as a woman leader?
So I think how it's influencing them is that, it doesn't matter who I lead. So if it's a male, a female, whoever, um it helps me not to have those, I guess, barriers
Hmm.
of not looking at somebody and just assuming that because of that diversity, I'm able to, get to know the person as a person not get to know them as what they look like.
Yeah.
And I think that's critically important, and also to um, that strength, I guess, um, makes me a strong woman.
Mm,
Because of that background, like I'm not intimidated. I'm not fearful. I have no issues dealing with all kinds of people. I mean, as as an HR leader, you
yeah.
have to deal with all kinds of people. You deal with people from the boardroom to the lowest level person on the shop floor, or
Hmm.
on a construction site or whatever it is, and you have to be able to interact with everyone. And
Yeah.
I think that has allowed me to do that, that
Mm.
that diversity.
And how would you describe your journey? So you are a director
Hmm.
and you have been for many years, but how did you make that? Because one of the things I do know about you is you studied in Canada.
Yeah, I guess I did. I
So,
worked in Canada for a little while.
oh, did you? Okay.
Hmm.
So how
Hmm.
has that journey happened for you?
Okay, so that's like a up and down journey, though. I mean, the thing is, um, so let me be honest. I went to Providence.
Hmm.
Um, Sister Regina, who was a principal when I went to school, secondary school back then. I mean, she is interesting, huh? Because she was really a strong woman, and I think the values, even though I have my family values,
Hmm.
a lot of my values too came from my secondary school and interaction with how she led.
Mm.
And so when I finished Providence, and I'll be honest, I didn't like school. I'm one of the people that do like school.
Yeah.
I like learning, but there's a difference, right? So I like
Yeah.
reading, I like learning, but not necessarily I like taking exams or
Yeah.
liking school. So I remember after finishing secondary school, my stepdad was like, "You need to go away and you need to do a degree, and you can't depend on a man, and you have to um, be self-sufficient." I mean,
Right.
he told me that when I was in my late teens, right? And that
Yeah.
was a wonderful piece of advice. So anyway, I mean, I went off to Canada and I went to one of the top universities. I went to University of Toronto. At that age, I'll be honest, I really didn't know. I started university 17, and I
Wow.
did not know what I wanted to do. I
Hmm.
really didn't know. So it was like exploration, It started off thinking, oh, I want to do accounting. I
Yeah.
thought, Dom, could you see me as an accountant?
No,
God, no. Right. So anyway, I realized that's not for
not
me,
fair.
not for me. But didn't know at the time that I would be in HR. But
Yeah.
about my first year, I'm like, which course I really, really enjoyed the most at
Got
school,
you.
and it ended up being statistics. Would you believe?
Okay.
So I actually have a degree in applied statistics.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So have a degree in applied statistics. So I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I got through that. I have one. And when I tell people that, they look at me like applied statistics.
Never
Oh my
knew
God.
that
And
about
you
you,
don't like
Leash.
and you don't like school, right? But one thing with me is when I start something, I'll finish it,
Finish
right?
it.
So I I yeah, so graduated and came back to Trinidad. And back then, it was really difficult to get jobs. The economy wasn't great at the time, but ended up getting a job in a company that was affiliated with the Massey Group at that time. It was an
Right.
insurance brokerage company. And the only job that they had was in IT.
Oh,
Taking my journey to see how I ended up, in a leadership position. So I said, "Oh, IT? Okay, well, I'll try it. I wanted a job, right?"
yeah.
Did that, and I guess I've always had people in my life that I've worked with who see my potential, I think.
Yeah.
So while there, the then head CEO said, "Oh, um, you know what? We should try her out as an account executive handling the insurances for the Massey Group, but let's send her on some training." I was like, "What?" But being young, and another thing try to tell young people, be open to the
To
experiences
explore.
that come your way
Yeah.
because you never know where it will take you.
Yeah.
So I did it um, through that brokerage company, met a lot of people in the Massey Group, but then, and I felt stayed, I would have risen faster, but met my husband. That was the end
Yeah.
of that. and we went to find a bad job. We went to Canada, and I worked for a while in insurance brokerage company, as an account executive,
Yeah.
and worked for was about 5 years or so, and then came back to Trinidad and said, I'd take a break, etc. And um, yeah, was somebody called me and said, I heard that you were coming back to Trinidad. You worked in the insurance sector, you have an IT background. We are implementing a new software. And given your combination of experience, we'd like you to come and help us implement the system. So I was open. I said, okay, yes, I would come. And quickly, of course, that was another experience, right?
Right.
So quickly, the company I went into, which was a large insurance company for the group, um, they were going through this exercise of which ones to sell, which ones not to sell, etc. Somehow I was put on a change team, and all these opportunities just started to come my way.
Yeah.
And while we were selling that company to another major company in Trinidad, I was the only one that was kept in the Massey group, and because I handled the people side, that's
That's
how I got
good.
into HR. I knew nothing about
Right.
HR, but
Yeah.
because of that acquisition, what was sale and acquisition, and because of my involvement in it,
Yeah.
that's how Norm I came into to HR, and from there, I think I had people supporting me,
Hmm.
and mentoring me along the way. So I've really been fortunate, and also too, I don't give up, huh? So I remember one chairman telling me, I don't know why they stand you. Well, I don't need HR in this organization. I say, well, I will show you. By the time I left that organization, there was a full-time HR person. So I think it was a little bit of persistence. So
Yeah.
I've had many varied jobs, I would say, and it has helped me to grow and blossom into different roles. So I not only do HR now, right, as you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's my leadership journey.
Yeah.
And just to tell young people, just be open to things that come your way,
And
you
apply
know?
the knowledge that you have, because what you
Yes,
described, having that applied statistics degree and being willing to lean into IT when it was new. I
it was
mean,
you.
that was new. So, seeing that connection was, or that someone saw the potential for you to have transferable skills. It actually speaks a lot about how you see others as well. Because in conversations that I've had with you about people going into roles, you do a lot of that. Well, they've done this, but they can transfer the skills into this area. And from what you've described, that's been your career. So you know what it takes to make that transition and make it work well.
Correct. And as you go in leadership, it's all about the soft skills. So it doesn't matter
Mm.
what role you've been in, right?
Yeah.
It's the ability to navigate those soft skills. And I
Yeah.
think as you go higher up in an organization, that is what is critical. Yes, you need to know the technical, but you also have people who work with you who can support that technical side. But
Mm.
you're responsible for more people. You're
Yeah.
responsible for leading more people. So that is important and becomes important.
Are you surprised that more um HR practitioners don't become CEOs?
Um, I'll answer that question two ways, right, Dom?
Hmm.
So I have had a few people tell me, for instance, you could have been a CEO, you could be a
Hmm.
CEO. Um, I think for most HR practitioners, they make a choice not to be the CEO because I think maybe we think that, as a CEO leading a company, the technical skill is critically important. So
Right.
as an HR person, I know the people side, but I may not know the industry I'm in, whether it
Mm.
be pharmaceutical or hospitality or construction, and I haven't had experience leading that kind of organization, so they take a step.
Yeah.
But through the years I've learned, and if I had to give advice to younger HR people, is that you can do it because
Mm.
what becomes most critical are the
It's
people
people.
skills.
Yeah.
And you could learn the technical, you could learn the business. So don't limit yourself. But I think we limit ourselves, right? So yeah, I think that not surprised,
Hmm.
but understand
Yeah.
why that is.
And then I guess if I push that a little further, I'm not sure that um, it's a fact for men who started off in HR, but there's something about a woman in that field, or my experience of women in that field is that we are so focused on supporting that and being leaders, but supportive leaders, that we don't often make that transition to just full stop leading.
Agreed. Exactly. Because we started off this conversation by saying that, and you said, when we were chatting offline before, that a lot of women prefer to be in that supportive function, prefer to not be in the limelight. We don't
Yeah.
want to be in the limelight, but as a CEO, you need to be in the limelight. You are the
Mm,
face of the organization. You are the one out there. And I think that plays a big part in it.
yeah.
You don't want to be that. And being a CEO means that.
Requires that.
It
Yeah.
requires that. Yeah.
Now, throughout the years, I've known you personally supporting um, women leaders, like finding their potential and developing it. Um, what advice would you give other leaders, managers, new to this realm about coaching and mentoring talent?
So the thing about coaching and mentoring talent is that you can't coach or mentor unless you know yourself,
Hmm.
right? You really can't coach and mentor or give anybody else advice until you're comfortable in your skin, until when it comes across to the person that your interest in coaching and mentoring is really about them
Hmm.
and not about you,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's one important piece of advice. The second thing is, um, in terms of coaching and mentoring, especially for women, I find is that we try, and I've seen this throughout, my years in HR. So because we want to be successful, just as our male counterparts, we sometimes think that we have to be like them.
Mm.
So we get on aggressive, we say that we have to act like them, same way in the boardroom, but actually we don't.
Yeah.
As a woman, we have a unique skill. We're very caring. Uh, we care about others. You want to take care of others,
Mm.
and we need to bring that out. We need to be our true selves and not try to say, okay, this is what success looks like, a successful person. Because think about it, Dominique. How many successful women you could think of when you look at around at the boards? And I did a little research, right? And I was like,
Right.
oh my gosh. So look at the major companies, and I'll have it written down here, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at some major groups in Trinidad, one is like 4 out of 13. So 4 out of 13 members on the board are women.
Right.
Another one is 2 out of 9 people are women. Another one is 3 out of 8. So the thing about it is that, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot of women coming into the workplace. Why is that not
Mm.
even 50% of the
Why is the
board?
transition not happening?
Why is the transition not happening? You know?
Yeah. So if your advice for, because if I think about the organization you work for now, there is
Mhm.
balance.
Oh, we definitely, our board is 50-50. Thanks to our chairman and deputy chairwoman,
Yeah.
and we want it to be that way. And that's a hard sector. That's a
Yeah.
male-dominated sector.
It is. It is. So that's
Mhm.
what I was gonna say. Like, how is it you've been able to succeed in doing that? What are the things that you've been really intentional about?
when I think about that, Dominique, the thing about that is that I hold firm to what I believe in,
Yeah.
and that doesn't waver,
Right.
right? So for me, one of the things I always tell people is that, don't be afraid to walk away from a job. I
Mm.
know that, you have your families, you have financial considerations, etc. But, you know, um, and if you know that in nature too, at the end of the day, you want to work in an organization where the values and the vision that the organization speaks to is what you truly believe in,
Yeah. There's
right?
alignment.
And there has to be alignment. And you know me, for me, if I'm working in an organization, I'll give you 150%, right?
Yeah.
But that alignment has to be there. If that
Mm.
alignment is not there, I cannot be true to myself and I cannot be my real authentic self. I can't really show up to work every day not believing in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So for me, that's important for me. And I think throughout my career, um, at every stage of my career, if that was an alignment, I was fine. When that was out of alignment, I
Yeah.
was not fine,
Yeah.
and then that journey had to end.
Yeah.
So I think that's critically important. I think that's what has allowed me to be in different roles, in varied roles.
And I know you also are a huge advocate for graduate trainee programs. And on your graduate trainee programs, there is
Hmm.
almost a balance in terms of the female to male engineering specialties. Um,
Correct.
and that
Correct.
has definitely changed the face of the construction industry
Hmm.
in the region, um,
Hmm.
through some of the work that you've done.
Yeah, and what I would say, Dominique, is, I have to make it clear too that we don't go out of our way to say, okay, you know what, our
This is
training
what we're.
program, we're going to bring at least 50%
Hmm.
women or
Hmm.
50% men. What we want is that we want the best persons,
Yeah.
who graduated to come into the company. But it so happens, when we get applications, 80% of the applications are women, are
Mm.
girls, are young girls,
Yeah.
right? And that's the reality that a lot more young women are going into fields that were primarily male,
Yeah.
and they are doing really well. And it's kind of worrying on the other end because they are shining their male counterparts. You're
Yeah.
laughing, but it's true. I mean,
It
you
is
know that I
true.
have two sons, and I'm like, oh God, you know what I mean? That's
as, as you said that, what was it like for you as you grew in in terms of your leadership journey, being a mother of triplets?
right. So, um, Dom, I always wanted kids, and luckily, God blessed us with triplets, and I have two wonderful boys and a girl. The thing about it, I would say to you that I think having those three children was my defining moment in my leadership career. And let me
Okay.
tell you why. I think so you think that as a woman, you have your children, you wanna be with them, you wanna raise them in a certain way. And how could you fit that all with working? That's a
Hmm.
reality, right?
Yeah.
Um, Most women face that. So you have to take some decisions that are sometimes difficult in terms of your career, to say, listen, I need to support these three of them. What I would say though is, I know I had a mentor who told me, Michelle, everything is for a time. And
Mm.
I've told young women that subsequently, because you know what, your children grow up, they're 20 years old in university, we've done a good job in university, but they grow up, they leave you, which means
Hmm.
that you shouldn't have to put yourself on hold,
Yeah.
right? You know, yes, you think about it, and yes, you think, oh, I'm going to manage it, but you know what? And I guess years after reflecting on this, I would encourage any woman, don't let being a mother or having a family deter you from your career and what you
Mm.
want to achieve. That's significant to do. That is really difficult to do when you reflect back on that. You
Mm.
know, it really is.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, one thing having no children taught me is that they also look up to me, especially my daughter, to see what is they're proud of, what has mom accomplished,
Yeah.
where's mom in her career. They want to see that too. So
Yeah.
you're not only doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for them too.
Yeah.
And
Setting
that
the
and then yeah, setting right, setting what's possible. So in a way that also sets expectations for them and um doesn't limit you once you realize that. But I've had conversations with a lot of women, when they have kids, do they want to stay in the workplace? And what I think it is all about giving women time
Yeah.
to adjust. Because if you have a superstar in your organization and you know that that superstar will benefit you in the future,
Mm.
3 to 6 months, 9 months out of years, supporting that person will
Yeah.
actually go a long way, right?
Mm.
Because you might not be able to find somebody like that person.
In the
It's been
future.
in top and not bringing people in and out, but you can't find that person. So,
It
you,
helps
you
with
have to
your
think about the way.
retention. Yeah.
Correct, correct.
And that
And
person feels more committed to the organization because they were committed to that person.
correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay. So as we talked about your daughter, Taylor, is
Mm-hmm.
there anything that from your leadership journey that you hope she will be able to avoid in the future? Are there things that you're hoping, 10 years from now, this won't be an issue anymore?
Yeah, 10 years from now, I hope, because it's still happening, that I have, yeah, you have leaders come and tell you, oh God, why does this one have to go up on maternity leave? Why
Mm.
is they having another child? You know, um, I hope that she doesn't have to go through that.
Yeah.
That is just totally non-existent. I hope that when, we recruit for organizations, that we don't recruit based on gender, that we are based on skill
Hmm.
level and what you could bring to the organization. I hope she doesn't have to contend with that.
Yeah.
So, and that's my hope. My hope for my daughter, Dom, and my son, is that they're happy in life. That
Hmm.
whatever they choose to do, they do it well.
Yeah.
And because it's something that you do for the rest of your life. I always tell them that. It was something that you'll be happy with and enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's really all that I want for all three of
All of
them.
them. Yeah. So if you had to use three words to describe your leadership style and how you show up to others, what would those three words be? What kind of are your motto?
So, you know me well. So one of the
Mhm.
things is persuasive. Um, I think that's one of my words, that
Yeah.
persuasive. Um, for me, it's about collaboration.
Yeah.
It's important. I right now where I work with a wonderful deputy chairwoman, and others in my company that we have a great relationship and we collaborate and we're very honest. We tell each other all kinds of stuff, right? When we try to be honest and,
Yeah.
and share. I think that's important. That being willing to be open. I think I'm open.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. Um, and a sense of vulnerability. You know,
Mm.
you have to be vulnerable.
And that,
We're not
wow.
perfect. We're not perfect. I'm definitely not perfect.
But it's so strange to hear vulnerability and leadership in the same sentence because it doesn't often um it's all often seen almost as a weakness, and what you've described is a strength.
No weakness. I think that's the issue with us women, because we're intuitive, because sometimes we make decisions based on our gut and
Mm.
not sometimes based on facts that we think it's not good. But actually it
Mm.
is. Because, as my staff would tell me, oh God, Michelle, you really told us this right. But you know what is a strength? I always thought it was a weakness, but it's yes.
A strength. Being
Yeah,
a
it is. Yeah.
Using it as a superpower. Wow. And so my last question for you, Mish, um, what's the legacy that you're leaving as a woman in leadership? I mean, what's important for you? What do you value?
What do I value? Dom, the only one thing I want to achieve is that, you know, if I interact with someone, that I touch them in a way that they will blossom in the future. And in HR, sometimes that doesn't only mean easy things. It sometimes means tough things like terminating people, separating them. But sometimes when you're terminated or separated, it doesn't mean a bad thing. It could actually lead to great things. So for me, with anybody that I interact with, I hope that I can touch them in a way that, they've developed.
Mhm.
They are happy. They have achieved what they wanted to achieve, and that's all that I would want for that
For
person.
that person. Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
And and I know that developing people brings you a lot of joy.
it does.
Um, so
Yeah, it
I
really,
know
really does.
and I have to say I am where I am because of some of your coaching and mentoring and just nurturing. So one of the things you have been really selfless about is sharing. So the fact that I have gotten to know your family, your husband, your children, is just because of how open and embracing you are. So I want to
Oh,
use this opportunity to say thank
oh, Dom, thank you so much.
you.
That is wonderful to hear.
So, Michelle, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today and just to share as openly and as vulnerably as you have. One of the things that you said about that I it kind of sat with me. I realized that you went to an all girls secondary school as well. Um,
Hmm.
I wonder if there's some connection there. So, I mean, for me, it was Bishops, you Providence, and I've had other guests who've been to all girls schools as well. So it's interesting how uh, that leadership, I guess, what's German, what's fed into you, even from a young age, kind of carries with you throughout your
Hmm.
life. So,
Yeah, and Dom, I mean, thank you for this whole experience. As I said, just reflecting on that first question about your roots.
mm,
Um, Really and truly, when we come to work or whatever we do in life, we show up as one person, and those things, your life journey really, really is important in terms of who you become and how you interact with people, and we all need to really reflect on that.
yeah,
Yeah, because it really does um, guide in terms of your leadership.
yeah,
And sometimes it's difficult to look at those things, but it's true.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to reflect and to share from your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Tom. It was a pleasure. And
Oh,
only you could get me to do this.
thank you, Michelle.